My name is Elena Torres, and I'm 31 years old. I was served with a restraining order on a Thursday afternoon in the lobby of my office while the receptionist stood a few feet away pretending not to hear a thing. She had called downstairs and said very carefully, "Elena, there's someone here for you." Not a client, not a delivery, not a scheduling issue. A process server. He handed me the envelope with the flat, practiced expression of someone who had delivered this kind of news too many times to feel anything about it. What I remember most is not the look on his face, though. It was the weight of the papers in my hand. Not heavy, exactly, just final. The petitioner was Adrian Blackwood, my boyfriend of 3 years. 28. Attractive in that polished, expensive way that made strangers assume he was softer than he really was. Charming when he wanted something. Tender when he felt insecure. Defensive every time money entered the conversation. According to the papers, I had emotionally and financially abused him. I stood in that lobby and read the order once. Then I read it again, slower. He claimed I monitored his spending, questioned his purchases, made him anxious around money, and used financial support to control him. His evidence was attached in neat little exhibits. A text where I asked why he had spent $1,800 at Nordstrom after telling me he couldn't afford his car payment, and an email where I suggested we sit down and make a budget because he kept saying he was drowning. That was it. That was the abuse. A question and a spreadsheet. What I felt first wasn't rage, it wasn't even heartbreak. It was something colder. The kind of clarity that hits so fast it feels like the room has been stripped of oxygen. Because reality looked nothing like the picture Adrian had just signed his name to. He had 4 credit cards in his own name that I had been paying down. His apartment lease had my name attached as guarantor because his credit was too damaged for him to qualify on his own. His car insurance sat under my policy. His phone was on my family plan. His streaming services, his temporary expenses, the weekly transfers that were always supposed to stop next month. I covered all of it. For 2 years, I had been carrying him through what he called a rough patch. Temporary became routine. Routine became expectation. Expectation became entitlement. And now asking one direct question about his spending had somehow turned me into a threat. The order required immediate compliance. No contact, no calls, no texts, no showing up near him. 100 yards of distance, direct or indirect communication prohibited. I could have panicked. I could have called him out of instinct. I could have done what I had done too many times before and rushed to repair the emotional mess while he stood safely inside the damage he created. Instead, I looked at the process server and said, "Understood." Then I went back upstairs. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't call my friends. I didn't hide in the bathroom shaking. I walked into my office, closed the door, laid the papers flat on my desk, opened my laptop, and started removing myself from Adrian's life exactly the way he had requested. Within the hour, I canceled the payments I had been making on all 4 of his cards. The cards weren't in my name. Adrian liked the appearance of independence too much for that. But the money covering them had been mine, and voluntary support is still voluntary. Optional means optional. Optional also means it can end. Next, I removed him as an authorized driver from my insurance. Then I called his apartment complex. The property manager, a calm woman named Adrian, pulled up the file while I listened to her keyboard clicks through the phone. "So you're listed as guarantor only," she said, "not tenant." "Correct." "And you'd like to withdraw?" "Yes." There was a brief pause. "That requires 30 days' notice." "That's fine." "If Mr. Blackwood cannot independently requalify or provide a new guarantor within that period, the lease will fall out of compliance." I leaned back in my chair. Meaning he would need to cure the issue or face eviction proceedings. I looked down at the restraining order again, at the word abusive sitting there in clean legal print, and felt that same cold stillness settle deeper. "I understand," I said. After that, I stopped the automatic transfers I had set up for his weekly expenses. I changed the passwords on the streaming services, removed his phone from my plan effective next cycle, forwarded every confirmation email to my personal account, and created a folder with dates on everything. A paper trail has a way of making the truth feel cleaner. By late afternoon, I had a 3 o'clock presentation to give, and I gave it perfectly. That part still makes me laugh in hindsight. My relationship was detonating in legal language, and I was standing in a conference room discussing quarterly projections like my personal life hadn't just been shoved off a cliff. But maybe that was the first moment I understood something important. I had been living inside Adrian's instability for so long that functioning calmly in a crisis felt natural to me. That evening, my phone stayed quiet. Too quiet. The order protected him from me, yes, but it also protected me from the usual cycle, the tearful explanation, the soft revision of facts, the accusation that I had misunderstood him, the promise to do better once I sent one more transfer, covered one more payment, fixed one more emergency. For the first time in years, silence didn't feel empty. It felt expensive, then peaceful. Saturday morning at 8, my phone rang from an unknown number. I let it ring once before answering. "Ms. Torres," a man said in a clipped, professional voice, "this is Bradley Hutchins. I represent Mr. Adrian Blackwood." I got up, crossed to the kitchen, and poured coffee before replying. "Go ahead." "I believe there has been a misunderstanding regarding the protective order." I smiled without humor. "What misunderstanding?" "Well, since the order was filed, several of my clients' financial arrangements appear to have changed rather suddenly." I stirred cream into the coffee and watched it fold into itself. "Such as?" "His cards are no longer being paid. His insurance status changed. There also appears to be an issue involving the apartment lease." I took a sip before answering. "I stopped making voluntary payments. I also withdrew from financial arrangements connected to someone who formally stated my financial involvement was abusive." He exhaled slowly, as if he had been hoping I would sound more rattled. "Ms. Torres, my client relied on those payments. Then he should have considered that before filing legal documents claiming I was harming him through them." There was a short silence. Then, carefully, "Surely you understand this may be interpreted as retaliation." "No," I said, "it's compliance." His tone hardened. "Mr. Blackwood is willing to discuss a modification to the order, so certain practical matters can be handled." "No need. You don't want to resolve this?" I looked out the kitchen window at the city waking up, sunlight sliding across the neighboring building, the kind of ordinary morning that makes personal ruin feel almost indecent. "The order was very clear," I said. "No contact means no contact, no personal relationship, no financial entanglement. I'm respecting his position completely." "But the lease?" "I contacted the property company, not Adrian." "But the outcome affects him." "The order affects me too," I said quietly. I adjusted. He went quiet again, and I could hear the shift happening in real time, the moment he realized the pressure point they expected to use had disappeared. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its polish. "This could create serious hardship for my client." I thought about the designer shoes, the dinners, the dramatic sigh Adrian always gave when rent was due, like life kept happening unfairly to him while shopping bags sat hidden in his closet. Then I thought about the papers in my desk drawer, with my name turned into a threat and my care turned into evidence. "That's unfortunate," I said, "but I'm not permitted to be involved in his life anymore. He made that very clear." Then I ended the call. I stood there for a moment with coffee in my hand, pulse steady, heart not broken the way I thought it would be. Just awake. By the time I set the mug down, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Adrian don't plan for consequences. They plan for panic, guilt, negotiation, and the desperate need to prove them wrong. What he had not planned for was this: distance fully honored. By Saturday afternoon, the silence was gone. Not from Adrian. From everyone else. The first message came around noon. "You really cut him off like that? That's cold." Then another. "You know he's not okay, right?" And another. This is exactly what he meant by control. I didn't reply to any of them. In most cases, I didn't even open them fully. I screenshotted, archived, and kept moving. Because whether those people intended it or not, they were stepping into something they shouldn't have been touching. If they were reaching out on his behalf, that mattered. If they were simply inserting themselves into a legal mess they barely understood, that mattered too. Either way, it told me everything I needed to know. I spent the rest of that afternoon organizing bank confirmations, cancellation notices, call logs, screenshots of incoming messages, and a timeline mapping exactly when the order was filed and when the financial support stopped. Clean, precise, emotionless. If things escalated, and something in my gut told me they would, I wasn't going to be the one scrambling later. Monday morning hit like a switch being flipped. At 8:12 a.m., I received a formal email from Bradley. Urgent. Financial obligation during transition. I opened it already knowing the tone before I finished the first paragraph. "Ms. Torres, while my client acknowledges the existence of the protective order, it was not intended to create immediate financial instability. Given your established pattern of financial support, we are requesting that you temporarily reinstate certain payments while a long-term resolution is discussed." I stopped reading halfway through. There it was. Not concern, not confusion, expectation. They didn't want me out of Adrian's life. They wanted my voice gone while my money stayed exactly where it had been. I set my phone down, waited a full minute, then picked it back up and replied, Mr. Hutchins, per the active restraining order, I am prohibited from maintaining personal contact with Mr. Blackwood, and I will not continue voluntary financial arrangements that he has characterized as abusive. I am fully complying with the court order. Please advise your client accordingly. I hit send and didn't look at my inbox again. The social media storm started an hour later. I didn't see it firsthand. Someone sent me screenshots. An Instagram story posted by Chloe, Adrian's best friend. Black background, white text. When toxic women weaponize money to control men after being called out for abuse, this is what it looks like. Below that were screenshots of messages between her and Adrian. That was the moment everything shifted, because Chloe made a mistake. Adrian's texts weren't curated, they were panicked. She canceled everything. I can't even log into Netflix. My cards are declining. I thought the order would make her stop asking questions, not cut me off completely. I stared at that last line longer than I should have. Not because it surprised me, but because seeing it in writing felt like watching the truth step into the room uninvited. He hadn't been afraid of me. He had been irritated by accountability. And the restraining order had never been about protection. It was leverage, a scare tactic, a way to silence the part of me that was finally asking where the money was going. Except this time the threat had backfired. I forwarded the screenshots to my lawyer. I had hired him Saturday afternoon. Harrison Cole, calm, methodical, the kind of man who didn't need volume to make a point. His response came 5 minutes later. This is useful. That was it. Not dramatic, not reactive. Just useful. By Tuesday, the situation had started to unravel both privately and in public. At 6:30 p.m., my phone rang. Adrienne. Ms. Torres, she said, her tone professional but sharper than usual. I'm required to inform you that Mr. Blackwood has not provided alternative qualification or a new guarantor. I leaned back against my couch. Understood. He has 23 days remaining. Please confirm my guarantee ends as scheduled. It does. There was a pause. Then, quieter. He came in today, with his mother. I closed my eyes briefly. Of course he had. And? Adrienne exhaled softly. There was an incident. Something in her tone made me sit up. What kind of incident? A document was submitted, a guarantee renewal form. And? It contained your signature. My stomach dropped, not in panic, but in recognition. Except, she continued, we have your signature on file, and security footage. I didn't speak. It was forged, Ms. Torres. The word hung there between us, cold and heavy. My legal department has been notified, she added. Local authorities have also been contacted. I let out a slow breath. Who submitted it? His mother. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time with the phone still in my hand. Not shocked, not even angry. Just certain, because that was the moment everything sharpened. This had never been only about a relationship falling apart. It was a pattern, a system. Adrian didn't do this alone. He had been taught, enabled, backed by someone who believed rules were just obstacles and signatures were just details. Suddenly, the restraining order, the accusation, the online narrative, it all felt less confusing. Not less serious, just more familiar in shape. I opened my laptop and added a new folder. Forgery. Inside it, I started a new document. Dates, calls, messages, names. Every piece of the puzzle laid out clean and sharp. The next message didn't come from Adrian. It came from his mother. Not through text, not through a call, through LinkedIn. I almost laughed when I saw the notification. Of all places. Her message read, Elena, this has gone far enough. You and Adrian had a disagreement, not a war. What you're doing now is excessive. Be mature. Fix this. No apology. No acknowledgement of the forged signature. No mention of the restraining order her son had filed. Just expectation. The same tone Adrian used when he needed something from me, only colder and more practiced. I didn't respond. I screenshotted it, forwarded it to Harrison, and closed the app. That was becoming a pattern. Silence on my end. Documentation on his. Harrison called an hour later. She contacted you directly? He asked. Yes. Good. I paused. Good? It shows pressure and escalation after the forgery issue. Keep it. She forged my signature. I know, he said calmly. And now she's trying to manage the story. There was a brief silence before he added, we can move if you want. Harassment arguments, possible counterclaims, fraud exposure connected to the lease issue. I looked out the window at the city moving like nothing unusual was happening. Not yet, I said. You're sure? I want to see how far they take this. A small pause. Then, almost amused, all right, but keep documenting everything. I am. I figured. Wednesday morning, things started breaking. Not metaphorically. Literally. At 9:04 a.m., someone I barely knew sent me another screenshot. A repost from Chloe. Adrian's car being towed. Caption. This is what financial abuse looks like. I stared at the image, then zoomed in on the paperwork visible near the windshield. 4 months overdue. I leaned back slowly. He hadn't been paying his car. For months, while still taking the money I had been sending for that exact purpose. This wasn't chaos. It was exposure. By noon, the comments under Chloe's post had shifted. At first, sympathy, then questions, then sharper questions. Wait, if she was paying his car, how was stopping that abuse? So she covered his bills and now she stopped? That sounds like consequences. The post disappeared within the hour. Too late. People had already screenshotted it and started connecting dots Adrian hadn't realized were visible. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself. I didn't correct anything. Truth doesn't need much help once lies start colliding with each other. At 2:17 p.m., Bradley called again. I let it ring twice before answering. Ms. Torres, he said quickly, my client is prepared to withdraw the restraining order. I didn't respond immediately. Is he? I said at last. Yes, we can file for dissolution and put this behind everyone. I smiled faintly. No. Silence. I'm sorry? I don't consent to that. You don't? He cut himself off. Ms. Torres, this would resolve the situation. The order exists for his protection, correct? Yes, but I wouldn't want him to feel unsafe. Another pause, longer this time. You can agree to mutual dismissal. I've adjusted my life to comply with the order, I said evenly. There's no need to change anything. His frustration finally slipped through. Your refusal to cooperate is creating unnecessary hardship. For him. Yes. I'm not allowed to be involved in his life, I said. That includes solving his problems. He's at risk of eviction. I'm aware. And you're comfortable with that? I thought about the document. The word abusive, typed, signed, filed. I'm comfortable respecting the boundaries he set. He exhaled sharply. This is not going to look good for you. I almost laughed. According to him, I'm already abusive. I'm just staying consistent with the story he told. He hung up. That evening, Harrison called again. They're panicking, he said without preamble. I figured. The forgery matter is moving forward. I sat up straighter. Already? Faster than expected. The property management company documented everything. Cameras, signature comparisons. It's clean. And Adrian? Claiming he had no knowledge. Of course he was. And his mother? Still trying to control damage, but there's more. My stomach tightened. What more? They didn't just attempt to renew the lease. They also tried to make changes involving your insurance. I blinked. What kind of changes? She attempted to add herself in relation to Adrian's coverage. I stared at the wall. He's 28. I'm aware. And that's not all, he said. There was also an attempt to open credit in your name. Everything inside me went still. Without my permission. Yes. I closed my eyes, not in shock, but in confirmation. At this point, nothing about them felt surprising anymore, only bigger. And they thought this would work? They thought, Harrison said, that you wouldn't push back. After the call ended, I sat for a long time and let the pieces settle. The restraining order, the financial cutoff, the online narrative, the forgery, the identity theft attempt. Layer by layer, the truth was surfacing. Not because I was exposing it, but because they couldn't stop escalating. People like Adrian don't stop when one strategy fails. They double down. They assume the system will keep bending the way it always has. Until it doesn't. By Thursday morning, the story had grown bigger than Adrian and bigger than me. It had become something people were watching, arguing about, and picking apart in comments like it was entertainment instead of someone's life collapsing in public. And the strangest part was that I still hadn't said a word. At 8:40 a.m., another email came in. Not Bradley. A new name. Rick Dalton, Esquire. Even the subject line felt more aggressive. Demand for emergency financial support. I opened it already knowing exactly what I would find. Ms. Torres, my client, Mr. Adrian Blackwood, is currently facing severe financial distress directly caused by your abrupt withdrawal of support following the filing of the protective order. Given the nature of your prior financial involvement, we are requesting immediate reinstatement of partial payments to prevent irreparable harm. I didn't bother finishing it. Different lawyer, same argument, same expectation. I forwarded it to Harrison. His reply came quickly. I'll handle it. 10 minutes later, he sent me a copy of his response. It was precise. Our client notes that Mr. Blackwood has formally alleged that her financial involvement constituted abuse. Facilitating continued financial dependency would directly contradict his stated need for protection. We decline your request. I read it twice. No anger, no sarcasm. Just logic sharpened until there was nowhere left to push. By midday, the forgery matter went public. Not on major news, but in the places that mattered. Court records, legal circles, quiet online spaces where facts move faster than rumors. Someone sent me the report. Monica Blackwood, arrested. Location, a yoga studio. Time, 7:12 a.m. I stared at that detail longer than I expected. There was something surreal about imagining her being led out of a lavender-scented room in handcuffs while soft music played in the background. The charges were worse than I had expected. Forgery, attempted identity theft, fraud-related filings connected to the lease and insurance. And buried in the report were text messages between her and Adrian. I shouldn't have read them, but I did. Mom, just sign it. She won't know. Are you sure? I've seen her signature 100 times. It's easy. What about the insurance? If you handle that, I can fix the car situation. I put my phone down slowly. There it was. Not confusion, not desperation. Coordination. That afternoon, the social media tone shifted again. Not sympathy this time. Discomfort. Because the abusive girlfriend story no longer held. Forgery charges. Identity theft attempts. Screenshots of Adrian admitting he expected the order to control me, not separate from me. Chloe posted again. Then deleted again. Push a narrative. Get contradicted. Erase it. Too late. The internet doesn't forget that fast. And then, just when I thought the situation couldn't get more surreal, Adrian's car was officially repossessed. Not a rumor, not a dramatic post, a documented action. 4 months unpaid. No extensions left, no cushion left. I found out the same way everyone else did, through a comment. Wait, if she stopped paying and the car got taken, doesn't that mean she was paying before? There was no answer, just silence. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I left work on time. No rushing, no checking my phone every 5 minutes, no anticipating the next thing Adrian needed me to save him from. I walked into a small cooking studio I had signed up for earlier that week. Fluorescent lights, stainless steel counters, garlic and butter in the air. Normal, almost painfully normal. For 2 hours, I focused on something simple. Measuring, stirring, following steps with clear beginnings and clear endings. No emotional traps, no hidden expectations, just cause and effect. You add heat, the sauce thickens. You don't, it doesn't. That was it. I didn't realize how much I needed that until I was standing there with flour on my hands, laughing quietly with strangers who knew nothing about restraining orders, forged signatures, or collapsing narratives. When I got home, my phone had another message, this time from Dylan, one of Adrian's friends. You're really going to let him lose everything over a fight? I stared at the screen for a moment before replying, my first response to any of them. I'm respecting his need to be protected from me. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, that's not what he meant. I typed slowly. Then he shouldn't have put it in a legal document. No reply after that. Later that night, I stood by my window again, city lights stretching in every direction, alive and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Adrian was trying to hold his life together with fewer and fewer options. New lawyer, public pressure, emotional appeals. None of it was working, because every solution required one thing he no longer had access to. Me. And for the first time since I had met him, that didn't make me feel guilty. It felt right. But I also knew this wasn't the end. People like Adrian don't accept consequences quietly. They escalate. They look for one last move that will drag the other person back into the game. And as I turned off the lights and let my apartment fall into silence, I had a feeling I knew exactly what that move would be. He would run out of options. And when he did, he wouldn't stay away. He didn't. It started with my mother. Of course it did. Because when he couldn't reach me directly, and his friends were no longer helping, and his lawyers had exhausted their polished threats, he went looking for someone he thought he could still influence. Someone softer, someone older, someone who might believe his version. He called her on a Sunday afternoon. My mother, Rosa, told me everything later. He sounded desperate, she said, her voice calm in that way that meant she was anything but. Like if he explained it just right, I would fix it for him. I leaned against my kitchen counter, phone pressed to my ear. What did he say? He said you refused to speak to him, that you cut him off financially without warning, that you were punishing him over a misunderstanding. I closed my eyes briefly. Same story, different audience. And what did you say? There was a pause. Then, almost amused, I asked him a very simple question. I could picture her face already, the slight tilt of her head, the steady tone that had dismantled more nonsense in my life than I could count. I asked him why my daughter would be speaking to a man she was legally required to stay away from. I let out a quiet breath. He didn't like that. I'm sure he didn't. He tried to explain it away. Said the restraining order was emotional. Said he didn't mean it like that. Like what? Like something that would actually have consequences. A bitter smile tugged at my mouth. There it was. Finally said out loud. According to my mother, the conversation only got worse from there. He said you were controlling, she continued. That you made him feel small about money. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to, because she did it for me. I asked him whether being supported financially by someone while lying about your spending counted as independence in his mind. Silence stretched between us. What did he say? He said I didn't understand him. Of course he did. And then? And then I asked him why he filed a legal document accusing you of abuse if what he really wanted was continued access to your life and your money. That time I laughed, soft, short, disbelieving, because that was it. That was the question no one on his side could answer. Not his lawyers, not his friends, not even him. He got upset after that, my mother said. Started saying you were ruining his life. I stared out the window. The same words again. Ruining, destroying, punishing. As if consequences were something I had invented. And what did you tell him? Her answer came without hesitation. I told him my daughter didn't ruin his life. She just stopped protecting him from the results of his own choices. The call ended shortly after that. He hung up on her. Not surprising. People like Adrian don't stay in conversations they can't steer. They retreat, regroup, and search for another opening. He found it the next day. Monday, day 24 of the 30-day notice on the apartment. I was in my office when security called upstairs. There's someone here asking for you, the guard said carefully. My stomach dropped, not in fear, but in recognition. Who? A pause. Adrian Blackwood. Of course. Of course he came himself. When every controlled channel had failed, he went back to the one thing he trusted most, direct access. Except he didn't have that anymore. Don't let him in, I said immediately. He's already making a scene. I stood up slowly, heart steady, mind clear. Call the police, I said. Another pause. Ma'am? He is not supposed to be here, I said. There is an active restraining order, and security already has notice of it. Understood. I didn't go downstairs. I didn't watch. I didn't need to. I already knew what it would look like. Adrian in a lobby that didn't belong to him, voice raised just enough to attract attention, trying to look like a victim, trying to turn public discomfort into leverage one more time. But this time there were rules, and this time those rules weren't his to interpret however he liked. 20 minutes later, I got confirmation. He had been arrested after refusing to leave and creating a disturbance despite the active order and prior notice. I sat down slowly in my chair and stared at the message on my phone, not shocked, not satisfied, just still. Because there is something different about watching someone collide with the consequences they were sure would never apply to them. It isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It is quiet and inevitable. That should have been enough. For anyone else, it would have been. But not for Adrian, and definitely not for his mother. Because by that evening, Monica decided to escalate one final time in the most ridiculous way possible. She called a press conference. I wish I were joking. Outside the courthouse, 3 reporters showed up, maybe 4. Just enough to make it look official, not enough to make it matter. She stood there dressed like she was attending a fundraiser and gave a speech about financial abuse in modern relationships, about how women like me weaponize money against vulnerable men, about how her son was a victim of manipulation and emotional coercion. I watched the clip later after someone posted it online. It didn't go viral the way she wanted it to. It went viral the way absurd things do when they are so disconnected from reality people can't stop watching. Because halfway through her speech, one of the reporters asked a question. Ma'am, aren't you currently facing charges related to forgery and identity theft in this same matter? The shift in her face was immediate. That's not relevant, she said. The reporter kept going. You allegedly forged this woman's signature to gain access to financial protections. How is that different from the abuse you're describing? Silence. Then, I was protecting my son. The clip ended there. It didn't need anything else. By the end of that night, everything had collapsed. Not slowly, not privately, publicly, messily, completely. Adrian had been arrested. His mother was under investigation. Their story had split open in front of anyone paying attention. And for the first time since this began, there was nothing left for them to escalate with. No angle left to play. No version of events that still held together. Just consequences waiting. The ending didn't come with a final confrontation. No screaming match, no last-minute apology, no moment where Adrian suddenly understood what he had done. That's not how people like him end things. They don't close chapters. They simply run out of pages. 48 hours after the arrest, Adrian called one last time. Ms. Torres, she said, voice steady and procedural. Mr. Blackwood has been formally evicted as of this morning. I leaned back in my chair and let the words settle. Understood. He has been given 48 hours to vacate the property. Did he find alternative housing? A brief pause. He applied to several places. All declined after credit and background checks. Of course they did. 4 months of missed payments, a recent arrest, an active restraining order, Public records tied to fraud and forgery, whether directly or through association. No landlord wants to sign on to that kind of risk. I see, I said, and I meant it, not as sympathy, as clarity. The final attempt came 3 days later. Rick called, not emailed, not through a letter, a direct call. That alone told me how desperate the situation had become. Ms. Torres, he said, skipping pleasantries, my client is prepared to make a statement. I said nothing. He is willing to formally acknowledge that the abuse allegations may have been exaggerated. May have been. I almost smiled. And in return, a temporary support arrangement, 6 months, just enough for him to stabilize. There it was, the final version of the same request. Different words, same core. Access, dependency, control reframed as need. Stabilize from what? I asked calmly. A pause. Then, awkwardly, financial displacement. I let the silence stretch. You mean consequences, I said. His tone tightened. Ms. Torres, this is not productive. No, I replied. What wasn't productive was filing a legal document accusing me of abuse to control my behavior. You're being unreasonable. I'm being consistent. Another pause. Longer this time. He's struggling, Rick said finally. This is difficult for him. I thought about the texts, the lies, the forged signature, the expectation that I would keep paying while being labeled dangerous. Then I thought about the moment in the lobby when those papers were first placed in my hand. How small I was supposed to feel, how quickly I was supposed to cave. No, I said quietly. This is just new for him. That was the last time anyone called. After that came silence. Real silence, not the kind filled with waiting, the kind that stays. I heard the rest the way people always hear the end of stories like this, through mutual acquaintances, casual conversations, fragments that eventually form a whole. Adrian moved back in with his mother. A one-bedroom apartment in a part of town he used to joke about avoiding. Monica was out on bail waiting for court. No more statements, no more press conferences, just quiet. The kind that follows public embarrassment. His credit score dropped hard. No cards, no approvals, no cushion. He picked up a retail job. Temporary, I was told. Just until things settle. They never do. Not like that. A few weeks later, I ran into Chloe at a grocery store. She saw me first and tried to turn away. Too late. We made eye contact. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I walked over. How's Adrian? I asked. Not mocking, not sharp, just curious. She hesitated, then sighed. He's not great. I figured. Another pause. He said you were cruel, she added, for cutting him off like that. I nodded slowly. He filed legal documents saying my financial support was abusive. Chloe winced. Yeah, when you say it like that. How else would you say it? She didn't answer. Because there wasn't another version left. I later learned Monica took a plea deal. Forgery, reduced charges, probation, community service, no jail time, but a permanent record, the kind that follows you long after people stop talking. Adrian started seeing someone new. Of course he did. A woman younger than me, someone who hadn't seen the pattern yet, someone he was already hinting should help while he got back on his feet. That part didn't surprise me. People like Adrian don't change. They transfer. As for me, I didn't rebuild anything. I redirected. The $3,500 I had been spending on him every month stayed in my account. At first, that felt strange, like forgetting to do something you had been doing on autopilot for years. Then it felt normal. Then it felt right. I increased my investments, set up a proper portfolio, finished the cooking course, bought an espresso machine I had been putting off because it wasn't necessary. Turns out it was. Not because I needed it to survive. Because I was finally allowed to want things for myself without justifying them. The restraining order remained active. 9 months left. He tried to have it dismissed. The judge refused, citing his own conduct, the disturbance at my office, and the broader legal complications already in motion. So now it protects both of us. Ironically, I keep a copy of it. Not framed, not displayed, just filed. A reminder, not of what happened, of what changed. Because in the end, Adrian didn't lose everything because I took it from him. He lost everything because he built his life on something that was never guaranteed. My silence, my patience, my willingness to absorb the cost of his choices. And the moment that disappeared, everything built on top of it started to fall. If there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's simple. When someone shows you who they are, especially in writing, believe them. Don't argue. Don't negotiate. Don't soften it into something easier to stay inside. Step back. Let it stand on its own. Then watch what happens when it no longer has you holding it up. Adrian wanted distance. He just never expected it to come without conditions.